welcome to season 2012, the year the Swans hoisted the Premiership Cup high in the sky for the fifth time in their history. Sydney are premiers is a retrospective podcast brought to you by the Swans Blog. We cast our gaze across the 2012 season and ultimately over one of the greatest grand finals of our modern era. Against the odds, the Swans achieved what many thought was beyond them, even impossible, against one of the most dominant teams of the last 50 years. We review each game, the season as a whole, and replay each match on our Facebook page. Grab a beer or a glass of wine, kick back, and enjoy the season in review. This is your hosts, Justin and Joshua. Joshua, thank you so much for joining me from the Swans cast and taking a break from that as we look at the 2012 season as a whole.
Happy to be here. Happy to get this one off the ground. This was our contingency plan in case the AFL season got cancelled. And I'm actually pretty excited about it, quite frankly, because I do not remember much of the home and away season that year. I remember the grand final, but everything else, it's a bit fuzzy.
Look, it's very hard to forget the grand final. It was arguably one of the greatest grand finals, not just of our modern era, but certainly of the last 50 to 60 years. It's right up there for not just the quality of play and not just the fact that each team had their own dominant patches, but the finish. Could you have scripted a better finish?
No, the finish was amazing. When we get to that game in quite a few weeks' time, I'm actually going to be interested to see if I still get filthy angry during the third quarter, like I remember being. I remember being absolutely ropeable during the third quarter for some reason. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then all of a sudden, McVeigh he snags that goal after the 50-minute penalty, and you're like, "Oh, we're still in this. We're still in this. We got a chance. We got a chance. Hawthorn's coming hard, but." Oh man, the finish. Or how about Jeddah's almost goal, the first goal of the grand final, almost goal, but touched on the goal line. Wow, I can't wait to get to that one.
I can't wait to get to it either. And for me, being a transported or transplanted New South Welshman, the guys I work with are all, you got to pick a team. You can't watch rugby anymore. You got to pick a good Victorian team. So pick Richmond. I'm like, who? Richmond? Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And just, it actually started out as a spiteful thing. I said, I'll follow the Swans because they were literally the only team I knew the name of.
Yeah.
And now the joke's on me because it cost me a lot of money a year going off games and memberships and all that sort of stuff. But I was at a barbecue with about 50 people and every single one of them, bar two, were barracking for Hawthorn.
Yep.
I was the lone Sydney supporter. And one of the guys, do you remember who was the goal umpire? The
Chelsea Roffey?
Chelsea, yeah. And so I was after the Swans, and my mate Pete was barracking for her. So he changed teams every quarter so he could barrack for her when she come up on screen to signal the goals. So, yeah.
That's some class.
Big game.
Yeah, that's some real class. Look, to be honest, I don't blame him. She was a good goal umpire, but she was also very good at her craft.
Oh, yeah. And if you know Pete, my mate Pete was absolutely frigging crazy anyway. So it just gave him a point to be different.
Oh, look, it was a great game, but it was preceded by an excellent season that at one point did see the Swans on top of the ladder for 6 rounds towards the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And had the not final sort of 3 or 4 rounds gone a little bit askew, it could have had the Swans on top of the ladder for the first time since 1996.
Yeah.
So, well, finishing minor premiers, that is. But
well,
in the end,
seems finishing minor premiers might actually be a curse for us.
Yeah, 2014 and 16 will. Let's not talk about those
let's
years.
not do that.
Yeah. So look, this podcast is a bit of a brainchild between the both of us. We wanted to go back and we wanted to look at a season that the Swans were successful in. We had the option of going back to 2005 or 2012. Now, 2005 is the breakout year. It is the ugly ducklings. It's the Demetrio going, Sydney will never win a premiership playing like this. After the first 5 rounds, we were doing okay, but Andrew Demetrio was slamming us. We had Paul Roos kind of defending us. I still remember those interviews where they're almost door-stopping people in the hallway in between quarters and at the end of matches. Like the press conferences were literally outside the men's room, stuff like that. It was pretty funny watching all of that vision. But the thing is, getting match replays from 2005 proved to be quite difficult. Unless you had them recorded or on DVDs, it was very, very difficult to get them. So, 2012. All the content is freely available on the internet. You can get it on AFL. All the replay information is there. All the stats information is there. So we don't have to do any major digging or hunting for any of the content. So that brings us to why we did the 2012 season. But it's also really hard to go past Dennis Cometti's call right at the end of the grand final when Malcheski kissed that goal, and he goes, "Sydney are premiers." You can't go past that.
I was going to say that Dennis Cometti, his commentary during that game was as good as it's ever going to get.
Yeah, agreed.
As good as it's ever going to get. So, and even that other clown, what's his name? I just
Bruce McAvaney.
skipped out of my... Even Bruce Mac, yeah.
He was good.
Bloody hell. I'm a little bit tired this afternoon. Even Bruce Mack, even he nailed it that game. And his commentary these days is not nearly as good as what he was doing then.
No.
He's brought more into that Triple J, Triple M crap they carry on with. But it's just a cracking game.
Well, 2012 was the first year that BT came into, I think, major prominence as a TV commentator. He came from radio, mostly from Triple M and other sources as well. And we're going to go into the first game later on in this first episode of the podcast. But you can see in the very first AFL round, his commentary was just so utterly bizarre. Like, there was one point where he called Everett Jetta. Oh, Jetta's in the forward line. Jetta goes for the mark, and it's like so clearly Everett. The guy's like
Craig Bird, Nick
90
Smith
centimeters.
like 3 times as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how do you get these confused? They don't even look the same. They've got different numbers.
I can kind of see how you might get Birdie and Smooch mixed up, but Jetta and Everett, come on. Come on.
Yeah, it was such a weird call. And you could see that, like, just the difference in the quality between how they were calling. It was just, Dennis Cometti, man, I wish you never retired. You were so good.
Yep. No, he's still the best caller of the modern era, in my opinion.
He is. Look, and for this series, it is the 5th time that the Swans lifted their Premiership Cup. They'd done it only 4 times before, and look, it's been a bit of a trying history as a South Melbourne Sydney Swans supporter. There was some success back in 33, 36. That's the 20th century, not the 21st century. So I'm talking about the 1900s here. Then we've got some success in the 1996 where we played in the grand final. Some continued success up until the late 90s. And then really from 2000 and onward, the Swans got back into the finals. They played finals every year except for 2009. 2007, they made an elimination final. 2008 and 2010. In 2011, they made semi-finals. I was actually at every single semi-final. I think I also went to the elimination final. Yeah, it's pretty amazing just the consistency of the Swans up until that point, which leads us into the 5th time that they've raised the Premiership Cup. And they did it coming into the final series really, I wouldn't say out of kilter or out of sorts, but certainly they came into every single finals match as underdogs. They came up against Adelaide, who they had a very bad record against, especially in Adelaide. Collingwood, who they hadn't beaten for 11 years. And Hawthorn, who the last time they beat them, I think they were about 75 points up at halftime in 2009 or 2008. So
yeah,
they didn't have a particularly good record against Hawthorn either.
No, my recollection is that they really embraced, probably not to the extent that the Bullfrogs did in 2016 or the Philly Eagles did against the Patriots in the Super Bowl the other year. But my recollection is that they really adopted that underdog mentality at the time. But I think if you honestly look at it, as far as we weren't particularly talented, but we had a really hard midfield as well. And if you had a really hard midfielder, you were always a chance.
Yeah, you are. And as far as our midfield goes, let's just say Josh Kennedy was an absolute steal.
Oh, yeah.
How we got him from Hawthorn, I do not know. And the fact of the matter is that he was second best on field against Hawthorn in the grand final.
Yep. And
he was one of the best players in the competition for 2012, despite 2011 being his first season after being recruited in the 2010 off-season. So a lot of people point to Paul Roos. Yeah, he left the Swans in a great position. He made a lot of good trades and a lot of good decisions in his last 2 seasons. He wasn't doing a Mick Malthouse, throwing the toys out and having a tantrum in the media saying, I still got it, then going to another club and just destroying the other club.
Of course, and you can see that by the depth of the team we had in 2012, that when we had the retirements, when when Bolton left, I know LRT was towards the end of his career, but he was pretty integral to that win. Even though those sort of guys who did retire at the end of 2012, it didn't really hurt us. We then went on to play 2 more grand finals in the next 4 years. So we had a pretty solid team, and that's a testament to Roosie. He left a very good set of stables for Longmire to play with.
Look, and we can't take anything away from Longmire because 2011 was his first season in charge. He adjusted the Swans. They were playing a more attacking brand of football, and they made a semi-final. And they played good football for most of the season. It's just they ran into a Hawthorn team that were not that far off making a grand final in 2011.
No.
So, yeah, they kind of ran smack bang into, let's just say, 2 of the best teams of a long, long time in that year. You could have put that 2011 Geelong or 2011 Collingwood as one of the best teams of really the last 20 years. Those
of
two
course,
teams,
and it's just a shame. It's just a shame that those 2 teams existed in the same time frame that Sydney had its best listed hits run for 50 years. And getting screwed by the umpires aside in 2016. This is why I can't buy into Longmire is completely done, because if you accept that we got screwed in 2016, you got to accept that Longmire's a 2-time premiership winning coach as well. So, having said that, I still want to see a little bit more attacking play horse.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is more modern day, but let's stick with 2012. Look, if you look at the way that we played back then, we didn't have a forward line to speak of. Sam Reid was 20 years old. He was our key forward.
Yeah, and as Richo said in the call of the first round game, Sam Reid had an almost game. He almost took 6 marks. He almost kicked 2 goals, and it's been 8 years, and we're still having almost games almost seasons from him. So, I guess it kind of proves the point that if you've got a hard midfield and you pump the ball in your forward line 70 times, you don't really need an amazing forward line if the ball goes in there enough.
That's
as long
true.
as you get half those entries are shots at goal, you're going to kick a winning score a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and that was our talent. Well, that's clearly the 2012 team's talent. Pump it in there as often as you can.
Yes, and we did. We got a lot of goals through that, and our leading goal kickers that year were pretty much midfielders. We had Adam Goods nearing the end of his career. At that point, he was starting to transition into more of a forward. We had LRT as our second tall forward. We had... I'm trying to think who else we had in the forward line. It's just dedicated forwards, apart from Sam Reid, LRT, and Adam Goods.
Not really. I mean, Lewis Jetta, I think was it Lewis Jetta our leading goal kicker, but he was getting more out the back and just, getting in there by sheer turns of speed in the end. Gary Rowan looked like he was going to be a good thing, but obviously things happened to Gary Rowan later on that year. It wasn't a particular, like you're right, it's not a particularly talented forward line, but the amount of times the ball goes in there is just incredible. Yeah. And the amount of times they lay a tackle in their forward 50 as well.
Yeah, and look, they were setting stat records back then that took not only the league but the club again years to get over and to overcome. You could look at Jude Bolton, who was more of a half forward flanker. He was laying 6 to 10 tackles a game every single game. Andreas Everett, he kicked a goal in the first game. He was basically like a half forward flank to a forward pocket as well. You even had players like Ted Richards, who would sort of swing backwards and forwards. Ben McGlynn, who spent a bit of time in midfield, but he was a forward pocket. And Luke Parker, he played a little bit of forward as well. So it was such an interesting lineup that because we didn't really have any distinct positional players that had very specific roles.
No, and with the exception of I'd say that Richards and Grundy had positional roles. And can I say, having watched a game with Smooch, Richards and Grundy at the height of their career, I forgot how much I liked watching Grundy and Richards play our back line.
Oh, they were good.
They were good.
Oh, yeah,
so
they were
good.
excellent. Look, we had a replay of the first round of the 2012 season, the Swans versus GWS. It's up on our Facebook page. We did a live broadcast. We even spliced in some classic ads from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We've got some more ideas for different ads and different formats that we're going to do in future broadcasts, but we're going to try and do a game a week, and then we're going to do a podcast that follows after that game. That first round match, also, we didn't see Reece Shaw either. So
No, we didn't.
So that defense got even better.
Yep. Yeah, it did.
And, I mean, you think back to Kieran Jack. Kieran Jack had 30 disposals. 30.
Oh, can I say as well that I know we had a lot of talk last season about how far Kieran Jack had fallen, but you don't really realise how far he fell off until you watch an old game.
Oh, yeah.
He was sensational. Like, and I know it was against GWS, but I think if you honestly look at GWS had a very good team then. They just couldn't convert it into a score.
Yeah.
Kieran Jack was phenomenal. And I miss that version of K-Jack. I miss all these guys.
Yeah.
I wish. Let's jump in a time machine and go back.
And bring them back to today and say play again, please. They'd probably make another grand final. Oh, yeah. It was just so good watching some of these players. But look, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of review about the 2011 season into the 2012 season. So I've already said that Longmire, it was his first season in charge. He got the Swans to a semi-final against Hawthorn, and this is really where that rivalry with Hawthorn started, was that year. We were just 3 goals down at three-quarter time in that game after an absolutely horrendous first quarter where we just got blasted off the park, and at halftime we were down by 6 goals, and it just looked game over. Yeah. This is very much like the 2015 qualifying final, but this is very much like the 2013 qualifying final, but we just didn't really look at the races in that first half. That third quarter was great, got us back within it, but you look at Roughhead and Franklin, they just killed us. Won by 6 goals in the end.
Yep. And, I remember little bits and pieces of that game, and if you were ever any doubt up until that point of what Franklin was going to be and what Roughhead was going to be, that game should have put it aside for you, because my recollection is that Franklin was pretty damn good.
Oh, Franklin was pretty damn good no matter what game he was playing. But that year, he was nigh on unstoppable. He was just ridiculously good.
Was that the year he kicked 100?
No, that was 2008 he kicked 100. I'm not sure if he kicked 100 that year. But he bagged 4 goals in that game.
Yep.
Poppy kicked 3. Dave Hale kicked 2 with 28 hitouts as well. So this is that semi-final. They had a lot of good contributors. And really for us, it was just that third quarter that brought us back into the match, but we just couldn't sustain it in the end.
Yeah, which isn't a terrible thing when you consider the team that Hawthorn had then. There's it's completely understandable why they would go on to win 3 in a row, and if they had beaten us, which by all rights they probably should on paper, they then win 4 in a row. To get a win over them in a grand final with the team that they fielded is just a monumental effort in its own. So, there's a lot of exciting stuff about 2012. Especially
with the team that we fielded. I mean, I'm looking at the goals that we kicked in that semi-final. Adam Goods 3. Right, Craig Bird 1. Ty Canelli 1. Jag McVeigh 1. Mumford was probably best on field. 48 hitouts, 1 goal. 14 disposals and 5 tackles. He also had 8 contested possessions. So he was amazing. Rocky, he only had 17 disposals that game, but kicked 3 goals. This is before his Norm Smith performance the following year. Sam Reid kicked the goal in his first season. Gary Rowan got 1 in his first season. And Matt Spanger kicked the goal.
Oh, Spanger.
That was the year we had Jesse White. We tried to get rid of him. We couldn't. We just couldn't get rid of him. You look at the different forward lines. Hawthorn at that point had a very set forward line. They had a very set defence. They had a very set midfield. The fact that they didn't dominate from 2008 to 2011 is really... I kind of hate to say it, but it's a bit more of an indictment on potentially that playing group, because they had, if you look at the teams between 2008 to 2012, there really isn't much difference.
Oh, of course.
It's still the same team, basically, just a couple of additions here and there.
Yep, of course. And I think if you've listened to some of the media that's come out of Hawthorn over the years from the players, that they actually admit that they came back from 2008 with massive heads, and it actually took them a few years to to get the professionalism they needed to go on. And a lot of people drew parallels between that team in 2008 from Hawthorn and what the Dogs did after 2016. Got big eggs, fell off the planet. So, I absolutely agree. They probably should have done more with that list that they had at the time.
And as it was for 2011, I mean, they weren't that far off. They didn't get to the last day. They played Collingwood. They ran headfirst into Collingwood, and they went down by 3 points in one ridiculously good preliminary final. I mean, that was sensational, but we're talking about a Collingwood outfit that was arguably the best defensive team that we've seen for a long time.
Yep.
And even then...
And then another team that should have done a hell of a lot more than they actually did with the list they had.
Yeah, exactly. But as it was, in the end, it was really just a little bit of arse at the end of a game that saw them over the top.
Yep.
And could you have imagined another Hawthorn-Geelong grand final?
No. God, no.
But
do you know, it's funny that... Do you remember back then, people were like, oh, thank goodness it's not Hawthorn, Geelong or something, or Collingwood or something along those lines.
Oh,
And then it became, within a few years, oh, God, Sydney again.
Well, put it this way, right? They were a quarter away from a grand final. They were leading by 17 at three-quarter time.
Yep.
In what was, at that point, a pretty dour, low-scoring game. But they had 18 scoring shots to 11 at that point. That's just that Collingwood went bang in that last quarter and ran right over the top. And, I mean, Chris Dawes kicked 3 goals. Chris Dawes, man. So, oh, man, I'd even forgotten about that player. But Jesus, I mean...
I can't even remember what he looks like.
That his only good game ever. But look, Luke Ball kicked the goal at the 25 minute 9 second mark of the last quarter, and then Travis Choke kicked it behind about a minute later, and that was the end of the match.
Yep.
So, look, they held a narrow 4-point lead. Collingwood took the lead about 5-6 minutes before the end of the match, and then Lance Franklin kicked the last goal for Hawthorn. They held a 4-point lead for only a couple of minutes in the end. So Collingwood got one back. And that was Darren Jolly. Played out that year. He got his second Premiership medal after his very famous 2006 performance.
Mm-hmm.
Enter Doyle, who was excellent, and exit to Jolly, who was rubbish. But that's just how the cookie crumbles. So good on him for getting his second Premiership flag. And that was a very entertaining... 2011 season was a very entertaining final series.
Yep.
But that brings us into the post-season changes, Josh. GWS, newest team, hey? After the Gold Coast Suns. They were,
newest team. I think, actually, having gone through the lists for the game the other day, I'm actually surprised how many experienced players that they actually had on that team. Recycle some other clubs. They weren't that bunch of junior burgers that I remember them being. And can I just say, I'm going to have to bring up Israel Folau because he's a big topic these days. But you just look at him and you go, he just looked like the wrong body shape. He looks like he's lost a lot of weight to get his aerobic capacity up from when he was playing rugby. But he's still got thighs on him like tree trunks, and he just doesn't look right. He just doesn't look right. And I understand why they got him, and it was just as much about, doing over the other code that's in town, but it failed for reasons.
Yeah.
And he just didn't look like he belonged out there. Even though Richo tries to talk him up in the commentary, he just didn't look like he fit the place.
No, he didn't. Look, there was a couple of moments there, especially in the third quarter, where he showed some flashes of brilliance, where he was able to chase down, impact the contest, get the ball, dish it off, and then dish it off, and then he was able to put in a shepherd and then do another 1% of follow-up after that, which was really impressive for a player who'd really only picked up the sport a year ago.
Oh, of course.
But skills-wise, he was nowhere near it. He was so far off it. It was, understood from a financial point of view what the Giants were trying to do. They were trying to bring in the NRL crowd by bringing in one of the biggest identities of NRL. But where it worked for the Suns with Carmichael Hunt, because Carmichael Hunt was actually a decent sports player, and Israel Folau he's one of the best rugby players that we've had for a long time. Carmichael Hunt was able to adjust and adapt to football better. But when you look at the Israel Folau thing, there was a bit happening off. He didn't really sort of pick up the sport at all. He couldn't really pick up the game at all. After 2 years, he just didn't look like he understood football at all.
No.
He didn't look like a player at all. He just had no real concept or understanding of how to play. He still could do some freakish athletic stuff, but it all looked like he was just relying on his athleticism to just do stuff rather than have some like intelligence on the field about how the game played. And for a player who never learnt the game growing up, that's bound to happen. It would be just like if you or I jumped into a game of EPL, English Premier League, and we're told to play midfield, and we're just looking at each other like, what the hell do we do now, sort of thing. That's kind of what like Israel Folau must have felt when he jumped in the first time, just like, well, what the hell do I do now?
Of course. But, I mean, GWS's team, I think if you look back, the scoreline doesn't really show how competitive they were. And really, they were really competitive up until their, I don't want to say lack of fitness, but I can't think of another way to phrase it. They just ran out of gas towards the end of the third quarter. But their team lineup, I mean, and a lot of these guys are still there. Phil Davis, Toby Green, Stephen Cornelio, who else you get? Jeremy Cameron. Jeremy Cameron, Dylan Shield. Well, I mean, he's not there, but guys who've become quite accomplished players with the Giants or have moved on to other clubs and are still in the system. The one that made me laugh was when you went, oh my God, I forgot Chad Corns played for GWS.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at it going, shit, is that Chad Corns? Oh my
Jacob
God.
Jacob Townsend.
Yeah.
Gets delisted, ends up at the Tigers, wins a flag, basically gets delisted again.
And he's at Essendon now.
And he's at Essendon. I didn't even know he was at Essendon. Like, there's a guy who burst onto the scene with 6 months of good footy and then just disappeared into the ether again.
All right.
Thomas Bugg, who eventually got the arse later on. But
well, let's have a quick look at the GWS team. And then we'll sort of go back into what the off-season stuff for us was leading into the first game of the season. Thomas Bugg ended up at Melbourne, delisted. Jeremy Cameron started off at centre-half back, is now one of the elite centre-half forwards.
Yep.
Kenigs, good old Niggy Stephen Cornelio, outstanding midfielder. Chad Corns, he played a couple of good seasons and then retired. He's pretty much the pre-Heath Shaw.
Yep, and still a better bloke than his brother.
Don't have to try hard for that. Don't have to try hard at all. Apparently, he's still a what do you call it? Volunteer fireman. I think he's a bit of a volunteer wanker, if you ask me.
Toby Green, he's had a punchable head in 2012, but I'd still have him in my team.
Oh yeah, even then, the first game he played, shit, he was good. Phil Davis. Now, Phil Davis came from another club, and he came in to be a captain as well. So he was kind of a known quantity at the time, but damn, he was good even for a young player back then.
Yep.
What did you make of Jonathan Giles?
I know we watched the game at the same time. I don't ever remember seeing him do anything.
Curtly Hampton.
Look, hey, well, he seemed to have a decent game until it came time to actually kick a goal, and then he couldn't hit the broadside of the barn from the inside of it. It was pretty average, actually. Yeah. I didn't like his game at all.
Then you got Jack Homsch as well. So Jack Homsch has made a pretty good career for himself. He's went to Port Adelaide in 2013, and he's ended up at the Gold Coast Suns now.
Yep.
Will Hoskin-Elliott, he is plying his trade at Collingwood after 4 seasons at GWS.
Yep.
Then you've got Adam Kennedy still there, still considered a good player. He's sort of in and out, but he's a good depth player. Good old James McDonald from the Demons. Man, he was old when they brought him in. He was one of the player coaches.
Yeah, he was too.
Reece Palmer from good old Freo boy. He played up until 2017 when he retired, when he went to Carlton, so he's no longer there. Dylan Shield. Now, he was excellent in that first game as well.
He was.
Didn't get much, but what he did was good.
What he did was good. I still think Essendon paid too much for him, but if you think you're about to enter a window, these are the trades you make and take, I guess. But I mean, all these guys that we just mentioned, all the new blokes who didn't come from other clubs, with the exception of Phil Davis, you look at him, you go, you can just see what they're going to be already.
Oh yeah. Well, now that we're looking through the crystal ball of times been, we can see the quality. I mean,
Yeah.
you can still say Devon Smith is probably as annoying and punchable back then as he is now.
So I think back then you look at it and you just see the scoreline and you go, oh, GWS got blown off the park. But actually, when you go back and watch it again, they didn't really get blown off the park in this game at all. They were pretty competitive for the most part.
They just couldn't score.
They just couldn't score.
And if you look at it, they got 5 individual goal kickers. And for the rest of the season, that was their biggest issue, was they just couldn't kick a score. And going into the final series last year, they still struggled. They still couldn't really kick a score. So the biggest issue is the fact that they've got a really good midfield, a decent defence, a decent forward line, but they can't kick scores. They can't kick scores consistently enough anyway.
No, but then, like you said, they got a good midfield. All the clearances, centre clearances, contested ball. It was exactly 50-50 split between Sydney and GWS in this game.
It was. Let's. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about the 2011 postseason changes, and then we're going to come back to the game review. But we made 3 trades in the off season. So the first one, Mitch Morton, he came in from Richmond for pick 79. Would you consider his trade in a win there, Josh?
At the time, I remember thinking, why? But
yeah,
he turns into a pretty integral part of what happens at the end of the year.
Well, there was that. I'm not quite sure if it's 2012 or 2013. No, it was. I think it was 20. It was later on when he was playing. It was Xavier Richards' debut game.
Yes.
And he basically got too anxious before the match. We'll put everyone should know by now that Mitch Morton suffered chronic anxiety when he played football. We're not talking a little bit of nervousness, we're talking chronic anxiety. So this guy would throw up before matches, he'd have panic attacks, he'd refuse to go out in the field. That's why every match that he was penciled in to play, there was an emergency, he was a very good chance of playing. And for Xavier Richards, it was his debut match, which is not 2012, that's 2013 when he played with his brother. But that was some of the issues that he dealt with. So, look, it was an interesting trade, I thought, at the time as well, Josh.
Yeah, I don't remember too much about. Like I said, I'm really reaching back now. I don't remember too much about the trades or the end of 2011, or much of 2012, just because shift workers curse. You know, I watch a game and then I wake up 2 days later and go, "Oh, did the footy happen?" Like I don't remember the game. But I don't remember too much about Mitch Morton at Richmond, and I don't remember too much about him during the 2012 season. But I remember at the time thinking, you know, why? Like, why would we take Mitch Morton? But the grand final thing speaks for itself later on. He has and when we get to the grand final, he has this passage play in the fourth quarter, which was absolutely integral to us actually winning the flag that year. So, in hindsight, I'm very happy to have Mitch Morton.
Oh, yeah. And it's an interesting story when you look at his 2012 season in general, the fact that he struggled to get into the team. And even when he got into the team, he really couldn't stay in the team at all. There was a lot of talk about his NEFL performance where he was breaking records for goals kicked in games. And it was very interesting discussion. If you go back into, basically if you jump in a time machine and look at discussion forums, such as Red and White Online, Big Footy, and there are a couple of other Sydney Swans-based forums, a lot of people were asking what's up with Mitch Morton, and there was a lot of reserve spectators who would watch the games and they'd say, well, he kicks like 13 goals, but he doesn't put any pressure on, he doesn't chase and he doesn't tackle, he just kicks goals, and he's always doing goals around the corner.
Yep. So there was a lot of pressure towards the end of the year as to why he was getting games.
Yes. So this guy was a massive goal kicker, but he was not defensive at all as a forward, which the Swans desperately needed. Then we go into, this is one that I just couldn't understand at the time, but we got some good picks out of it in the end, was Tony Armstrong. Now we got Tony Armstrong, pick 35 and 68, and for him, we sent Lewis Johnston.
Really?
Now, Lewis Johnston didn't really have much of a career at Sydney, and he had barely any kind of a career at Adelaide.
Like, just to be clear, we've only ever had one Lewis Johnston, haven't we?
Yeah.
We got that for Lewis Johnston.
Yep.
Wow.
Now, Tony Armstrong wasn't a particularly good player, and in the end, he was traded on to Collingwood. And there's actually a really kind of interesting bit of history with Tony Armstrong in that he's one of the very few modern AFL players who have had to play 2 AFL-length matches in one day.
Yep.
So there was a game, might have been around 2014 sometime, where he played a VFL match for Collingwood's affiliate team, and he wasn't listed as an emergency for the senior match, but then there was a bunch of omissions, and he became an emergency, and the omissions kept on happening, and then before he knew it, he was also playing in the senior team as a defender.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, that's how fit he was. He was a really fit player, and unfortunately just not particularly good. The third trade-in, which there was some excitement around, although I still couldn't understand it at the time, was Tommy Walsh. Now, we sent to St Kilda picks 35 and 68 that we got from Adelaide. And the biggest impact that guy had was, I think, on his first match, or maybe second match he played for the Swans, he destroyed his hamstring.
That's right. Yep.
Blew it up, ripped it clean off the bone, went back
clean
to
off the bone.
Ireland.
It was never any good after that.
No, he kind of recovered, went back to Ireland for recovery. He never came back.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was really unfortunate what happened to the guy, because he had some potential as a forward.
Yeah.
He's very athletic, very quick, very strong. But, it's just very, very unfortunate what happened to him. Retirements, Daniel Bradshaw.
Some big names on this list.
Yeah, there are. Daniel Bradshaw came from the Lions. Craig Bolton, Premiership centre-half back. And Ty Canale, Premiership back pocket as well.
Yep.
Delistings. We've got a couple of names in delistings here, Josh. Paul Bevan. Do you remember Paul Bevan?
I remember Paul Bevan.
Hard nut defender. Max Otten, Daniel Curry, and Campbell Heath, they sort of topped the next 3. Campbell Heath was redrafted later on that year as a rookie draft anyway. Didn't really have much of a career, didn't really get any opportunity. And to be honest, in the team that we had for the next couple of years, there was no chance he was getting a look in.
No.
Do you want to tell us about the draft?
The drafts. Drafted a lot of people, but there's not. We've only got one of them left. Our first round selection at 21 was actually Tommy Mitchell, and I don't want to dwell on the Tom Mitchell thing at all. Suffice to say, it was quite a while before he debuted, and he ain't there anymore.
Well, on the Tom Mitchell one, there was a lot of controversy about the fact that we're actually able to get him for basically nothing.
Is that because an interstate club drafted him for nothing, though? Because if it was Collingwood, no one would have given a shit. Sorry, no one would have cared.
Hey, man, look, I don't mind the swearing, but...
Or if Carlton had drafted him as father-son at that selection, no one would have cared.
No, Carlton wanted him. Carlton wanted him bad. But the rule at the time was academy and father-son, you could match any bid and it would automatically go to the end of that round. So Carlton tried to pick him up with their first pick. Sydney matched it, and then all of a sudden it's pick 21 in the first round.
Of course, but if the roles were reversed, they wouldn't care. That's what I'm saying.
But the Tom Mitchell, and then later on the Isaac Heaney, and then the Callum Mills, basically Tom Mitchell and Isaac Heaney coming out of the Sydney Academy was what forced the AFL to change the draft rules. So that's like a bit of funny trivia about the Tom Mitchell draft, is the fact that he was 50% responsible for the new drafting rules coming in, whereby Academy and father-son has a 25% discount.
Pick 43 was Jordan Lockyer. Pick 61, Alex Brown. Pick 85 was Nathan Gordon. He was rookie listed. Shane Biggs, pick 13. That's rookie listed as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so he came from the rookie draft, and his major game of prominence was the 2013 prelim against Fremantle. He came in for the semi-final and the prelim that year, which are really the only games he played.
Rookie draft, pick 31, Campbell Heath. Pick 93 in the rookie draft was actually Harry Cunningham, and he's the only one who's still left on the list.
Sydney passed 5 times in the rookie draft. 5 times before picking up Harry Cunningham.
Yeah.
And he's slated as being one of the potential captains of the club.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's going to be a 200 gamer.
Yeah, if he can stay fit.
Well, the good thing is he actually has stayed fit for quite a long time, and he's a decent contributor.
Of course he is, and I think he still cops a lot of flack. He definitely copped a lot of flack last year about his supposed lack of input or output, but I think people are expecting too much for him. He's the definition of a role player. Yeah, you give him a job and he does it. So he's not expected to be a star. He just needs to be consistent. I think last year he was incredibly important for us in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, absolutely, and 2018 as well.
in 2018. I think in 2018 he was probably our most consistent player for the whole season. I like Cunners. I think he cops a lot of flack that he doesn't deserve.
Yeah, look, we nickname him Grappy Cunningham in the household, but it's a loving, endearing name because, sometimes, just like all players, they have their moments, and but for Cunningham, he has a lot of good moments that go unnoticed, and he is one of the better ball users.
Oh, he's definitely one of our best users by foot. That's statistically just the way it is. He's literally 70-75% foot all the time, and he can tag, and he's got a decent bit of speed about him. So I don't mind him. I think if you're going to find a hole within our team structure at the moment, he ain't it.
No, he's far from the problem. Let's just put it that way. Our defence has got a big chunky question mark over it at the moment, and rightfully so. Oh man, looking back on this team, I don't know how our defence got to this point, but rule changes. So in 2011, there was a major shake-up of the rules. The interchange was changed, so you had 1 substitute and 3 interchange players. You also had rules around how the advantage rule would be applied if the infringed player plays on, things like that. There was a lot of good confusion through 2011 about that. The player who elects to apply a bump in any situation, if they hit the head, they could cop a serious whack, and that's when that whole concussion thing came in. Yep. Emergency field umpire had more powers on the field, and there were stricter interpretations on deliberate out of bounds, which came in a couple of years after the Hawthorn Grand Final debacle, where they were just walking it over the boundary line, or walking it over the goal line, really.
Yep.
And in 2012, the introduction of the goal line technology. And the amazing thing is, in this match...
The technology still hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. It's still as bad. But the Sydney GWS game was a Friday night game. It was the first game of the season.
It's at ANZ. And ANZ has a crap playing surface.
Dreadful stadium for any kind of sport, apart from the Olympics back in 2000. But the major thing about the goal line technology is they actually had a review on the night, and it was successful.
Yeah, it was too.
So they put their goal line technology into play in the first match. They went, oh, this is easy. And then within a couple of weeks, they're just like, oh, God, this is terrible. We haven't thought about this at all. And here we are. What are we? 8 years down the track.
8 years later,
9 years.
Same issues.
Now we're talking about a bunker and all this sort of stuff because every person who watches it has a different interpretation. It's even worse. They should have just got rid of it and kept it to the goal umpires. The other reason, if you remember in the 2010? Yeah, 2009 Grand Final. I'm trying to remember this. The 2009 Grand Final was when Tom Hawkins kicked I'm pretty sure it was that Grand Final where Tom Hawkins kicked a goal that wasn't a goal.
That wasn't a goal, yep.
That was 2009 when they beat St Kilda by 2 goals.
Yep.
And that was one of the main reasons why this came in. But let's go back to the game. The Swans, they played... wouldn't say brilliant. They played decent football. They got the job done. They did what they had to get the job done.
It looked like a round 1 game, let's be honest. It was a bit scrappy. There was a few guys who weren't up to it or didn't have their groove on. The midfield worked okay. The forward line was a bit dysfunctional, but we just said earlier we didn't really have a forward line.
No.
Our defenders were awesome.
Yep.
There's no question about that. Our back six was great. Adam Goods... Adam Goods had a bit of a shocker for the first half. Who else is it? Adam Goods had a shocker. I think you and I both agreed that Mumford was worst on ground.
Yep.
And still manages to pick up a Brownlow.
I don't know how they managed that. That's one of the most baffling decisions because he had a ton of free against. Within the first quarter and a bit, he had 3 free kicks against and he reversed a set shot on goal.
Yep. Yeah. So Sam Reid got denied a shot on goal. Gary Rowan had the same game he was having 8 years later, and he still managed to nearly knock himself out by going in head first.
And he's now jumping on trampolines and nearly knocking himself out as well.
Yeah, singing Cotton Eye Joe. Craig Bird, I actually forgot. This is the surprise of this game for me. I forgot how good Craig Bird was.
Oh, he was awesome that year.
He was he had 30 touches. He kicked 2.2 goals. Or 2 goals, 2 behinds. He just had a great game, and I forgot how good he was. Dan Hanbury really looked like the new bloke.
Yep. How about Luke Parker? Luke Parker had more disposals than Dan Hanbury, and Dan Hanbury was a more experienced player as well.
Yep.
And Luke Parker
running
was
around with his shoulders
first or
taped and
second
his
year.
tongue hanging out of his head.
Yep. Those blonde locks and the skinny body that we don't see anymore.
Yep. Josh Kennedy was definitely our best midfielder, much like he still is now. Jude Bolton, I thought Jude didn't really achieve much in this game, but when you go back and actually looked at the stats, he actually touched the ball a lot.
He had
so
25 and 10. 25 and 11.
Yeah, and a goal.
Yeah, and a goal, 6 tackles. So he was doing his bit. But he was playing as a half-forward flank, so 4 inside 50s and 5 clearances, which is absolutely fantastic. If we had that to go with Josh Kennedy in our team, oh, man, I'd love it.
Who else is there? Kieran Jack was great. Andreas Everett might as well have not been on the field. I thought Teddy Richards was best on ground.
Ted
just
Richards
intercepted
awesome.
everything that came near him.
LRT was hopeless as a forward that match.
Yeah, I'm glad they swap him into defence later on in the year, that's for sure.
But he was our full forward in the grand final.
Yeah, I know. He had a couple of important points in the back, important moments in the back line though in that grand final though.
He did. Nick Smith was awesome as back pocket again.
And can I say that I'm going to have a hard time watching Alex Johnson for the next however many months it takes us to do this 2012 season review,
he was good.
He had a good game, and it just breaks my heart to know that this is his last season.
Man, he even kicked a point as well.
Yeah, he did a lot of good work.
He was excellent. He really was. But, I mean, Adam Goods, I mean, he had a bit of an off match, but his stats still look good. You know, he had 21 disposals. He managed to hit out despite the fact he hasn't rucked for like 6-7 years before then. Couple of tackles, 7 inside 50s and 3 clearances. I mean, that's pretty good work from a guy who was playing almost permanently full forward. But Heath Grundy, he had 8 1%ers. Man, you just miss him because he was so good, so reliable. He was literally impossible to beat on a lead, despite the fact what Ted Richards describes as basically a barge ass. He has a turning circle of a bus. And he's about as fast as a rowboat down the field.
Yep. And you really start to... I've already got an appreciation just how much pace these guys lost over the next few years as well. Like I was actually quite shocked at one stage to see how quick Heath Grundy was covering the ground. And I'm sitting here going, I don't remember this guy moving that quick.
No, exactly. And then you look at Lewis Jetta, 20 disposals, 2 goals. 45-goal season.
Yep.
And you could see the moments. The moments were there. But then there was also the moments we just like... I remember we were watching it and I'm sending a message to you and I'm saying, how on earth did this guy have a 45-goal season? And then he bobs up with 2 goals and 20 disposals. That's how.
He bobs up out the back.
Yep.
It's actually a little bit... I want to say Cyril Rioli-like, but there's in the way he scored those 2 goals in this particular game, it was a little bit Cyril Rioli-like, quite frankly.
Yeah, it was. He had 3 clearances to go with his 3 tackles and 5 contested possessions. So he didn't exactly do it bruise-free. He did get in there and he did work for it and he did lay some tackles and his pressure was up there. It's just, I mean, you're looking at a kid who's really in, his 2nd, 3rd season of football. This is a guy who famously kicked 19 points in a row before he kicked his first goal.
And just back to Adam Goods, like I know he didn't have a particularly good game, but there is something about the way that man moves. He doesn't run. He floats. Like
he's a gazelle.
I actually called him a gazelle the other night, I think, in our group chat. Is there something about the way that guy moves that I could just sit there and watch the man run around in circles. He just looks like he floats, and all his handballs are so silky smooth and fluid, and his foot skills are just great. And if watching Alex Johnson for the next few months is going to make me want to cry, just watching a season of Adam Goods, being Adam Goods, he's just going to be like honey to me. Honestly, I miss. If there's a person I miss on the field, it's this guy.
Well, I'm also looking forward to watching Martin Matner lock down as well. He was an excellent defender. His lockdown was as good as Grundy. He was an excellent defender. That fact that we got him from Adelaide for a half-eaten packet of chips is, it's one of the best trades we've done. Done for a long time.
Of course. And I actually feel that when Marty Matner retired, that was when sort of the rot started to set in Sydney's defence as well.
It was. It threw us out of balance. Nick Malcheski had to play a different role because Malcheski was higher up the field. He was a winger, almost a half-back flank. He kind of played in between those roles. Like, if we're looking at Jack Lloyd is another player, like Harry Cunningham, who's copped a lot of flack. When he first played, he was playing more as a halfback flank winger, which is what it looks like the Swans have tried to do in 2020, is move him higher up the field again. But what happened with the Matner retirement in 2013, midway through 2013, when he did his hip and then he just had to retire because his hip was gone, was it forced Malcheski to play a more defensive role, which took away from that rebounding game that he had. And this is also Reece Shaw at the end of his career, who at that point, we're talking like 2012 is amazing. In 2013, he was struggling with injuries. He was coming right to the end of his career. So that defence really suffered the shock of two major contributors just disappearing within a season.
Yep, and a lot of that speed and drive we used to have off the backline disappeared with them. And then everyone we drafted after that who had that kind of speed never have the ball use that those two guys had.
No, and that's how he ended up with Gary Rowan at playing back pocket in a 2014 preliminary final, playing one of the best games he's played, arguably career best game, and then following it up with an absolute shocker in the grand final.
Yeah.
Look, that's not a criticism on him. He's not a natural defender. They tried to mold him into that. But again, it's like you said, like we lost that pace, we lost that ball use, and the Swans tried to replicate it, but no one's really come close to it. The only player I can think of, we got rid of him, is Zach Jones.
Yeah, but Zach Jones never had the ball use. Do you know what I mean? Like I watch. I remember watching, Malcheski and Reece Shaw and those kind of guys coming off the halfback flank and sticking on their boot, and I never had to cringe when they put on their boot. But every time Jones kicked the ball, I just cringe.
Yeah.
You just don't know where it's going to go.
Well, the other player that the Swans tried to mould into that, well, they tried a couple from this team specifically, was they tried Craig Bird as a defender, which failed miserably. They stopped that experiment real fast. But Harry Cunningham, he went in and he was playing back pocket after the shake-up the following season. He was playing back pocket for a couple of years. Back pocket, half-back flank.
And he actually did okay.
He did okay, yeah.
He did okay. He wasn't outstanding, and I think by the time, if Harry Cunningham was a piece of the bigger picture, was a piece of a more established lineup, it probably would have worked a lot better. But he was kind of inserted to plug a hole in a pretty ad hoc lineup at that time. So,
I mean, let's not forget that he was part of a defence that made the 2016 grand final.
Oh yeah.
And you can also look at other players that have been rotated through that back line as well. I mean, we're talking about Sam Reid being transformed into a centre-half back in 2016, 2017 as well.
Yep.
So, look, it's...
And I think we still agree that if Elia doesn't get injured, we win 2016.
Yeah, agree. I mean,
but I
still
also
think
say that if Alex Johnson's ACL repair works, we win 2016.
Yeah, and I still think we should have played a half-fit Elia in the 2016 grand final.
Yeah, it might have been worth a punt.
Because, let's face it, the replacements who came in were horrendous. And we should have played a Sam Reid who had no football for a year and a half, instead of who we played in the forward line for that year as well.
Yeah.
But look, that's time passed. We're not going to do a review of that season, thank God. Maybe up until the grand final, but not at the...
If Dan Hanbury doesn't... I just want to say right now that if Dan Hanbury doesn't get injured, we win that game.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get off this because I'm going to get angry
now. Brownlow votes. So 3 to go to Josh Kennedy, 2 go to Kieran Jack, and 1 to Shane Mumford. We still can't believe it. I just can't believe it. He was hopeless. He got the hitouts, but he was absolutely atrocious that match.
Yeah.
Stats. And
I've got no idea how Teddy Richards doesn't get a vote.
Man,
I've got no idea how Richards doesn't get a vote.
I know. But the interesting thing here, and we talked about this offline, and we can't stress this enough, we think that even though GWS were a new team at that time, and we've got a lot of players playing their first games, they were still a quality team back then, even though a lot of their 18-year-olds were first-time players. We had 21 more disposals, only 6 more hitouts, and this is with a team with Jonathan Giles. And we only had 6 more hitouts, 16 more tackles. We smashed them on inside 50, 71 at 28, so that's plus 43, Josh. Clearances, dead even. Contested possessions, only 16 more. Only 4 more contested marks, 12 to 16. And get this, dead even marks inside 50.
Yep. We had 25-5 inside 50 tackles, though. Like, we led that. And I think that was probably the difference in the game.
Yeah, we were able to get that pressure. They struggled to deal with it. And you look at the teams, I mean, they weren't going to deal with that coming from the NEFL.
No.
They had some experience. Callum Ward has had some experience. Dom Tyson had a bit of experience. Reece Palmer had a bit of experience. James McDonald, the playing coach, had some experiences. They had some experience throughout the team. It's just that a lot of the players in new positions, a lot of the debutants, just didn't have the experience of AFL football.
No.
And we are also talking about Kevin Sheedy coming out of retirement, coaching GWS for the first couple of seasons. He had that rousing pre-game speech of "Don't you let any team dominate you." I still sort of remember chuckling to that, but because we kind of went out there and mauled them in the third quarter, and it looked like it was going to be a 100+ blowout. But all credit given to GWS for coming back. They were pretty good back then.
Yep,
especially
and you can
for a first
see.
game.
And they drive off their halfback line as well. You can just see the beginning to the orange tsunami in that game. You can, and I know later on that season they fall apart because they're a first-year team, but you can just, knowing what we know now, you can just see what they're going to become.
Well, within 4 years, they probably should have had their first flag. Let's face it. Okay, 2016, we were excellent, right? But if you look at GWS, that were better.
I think we could both agree that if Stevie J doesn't clean Kennedy up in the head in that semi-final, GWS win the next week against the Dogs.
Yeah.
Which means we play GWS, and GWS probably win that grand final.
Yeah. Well, they smashed us. Not only they smashed us on the scoreline, they beat the living daylights out of us on the field as well in that qualifying final. They bashed us.
If Stevie J plays in the prelim against the Western Bulldogs, GWS win that game.
Well,
and they trounce us in the grand final.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget that Mumford broke Tippett's jaw that match. Gary Rowan had a moment. Kennedy got knocked halfway to the moon and back.
Luke Parker does a PCL in his knee.
Yep. So we got absolutely smashed in that.
And part of this too is playing on that cow paddock playing surface at ANZ as well.
Oh, it was a shit field, and we shouldn't have been playing there. But the AFL wanted the crowd, and as it wasn't a big crowd compared to the SCG. It was a couple thousand more.
No, and this is one of the tragedies of 2016. Not only did we get stitched up by the umpires, we got a lot of our injuries were picked up playing on a substandard playing surface in that final against GWS, and it murdered us 2 weeks later.
It did, and we had that moment where Gary Rowan almost killed himself against Adelaide.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we absolutely blasted Geelong out of the water in the first quarter of the prelim final. So it kind of balanced itself out. It's just a shame that Aliir went down in that game as well. And we came into the grand final. We're coming in with Callum Mills, who hadn't played in a month.
Jared McVeigh had a calf, I think.
He did his calf in the first final. Jeremy Laidler, who hadn't played in like 15 years. Harry Marsh, who most wish he hadn't played in 15 years.
Yeah.
So, as far as the defence goes, we were really underdone, and let's not talk about that grand final.
Top five.
Top five. Josh, you give us your top five, please, sir.
Just off the top of my head, I'm going to go Josh Kennedy. So 5 points. So 5 points Kennedy, 4 points Parker, 3 to Teddy Richards, 2 Kieran Jack, and 1 for probably Craig Bird.
Man, that is one interesting choice. One extraordinarily interesting choice. You know,
just looking at the numbers, like I probably should have Teddy Richards higher up on the list than that.
Yeah, I know.
But now that I've actually had a look at Kennedy's numbers, I can't get away from Kennedy.
No, he was excellent as usual. And look, I can't disagree with you there, and I can't even disagree with the umpires on this one. They gave him the 3. I'd have to give him 5. I think where I'm going to differ with you a little bit is I'm going to follow it up with Kieran Jack 4.
Yeah, righto.
4. I'm also going to give Craig Bird 3 and Jude Bolton 2.
Okay.
And give an old teddy bear 1.
Yeah. I guess I've got Teddy higher because I thought for the first half Teddy was definitely the best on ground.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Now, and I feel sorry for defenders because they don't get enough love.
No. No, they don't. But, I mean, are you sure you want to give 4 to Parker? I mean, he was good. He was good.
Considering his experience base, I thought he was really influential. So maybe that's been a little bit different with the rules for handing out, with the idea of handing out best on ground stuff. But I thought, given his experience base at the time, I thought he was quite influential.
Yeah, look, he was a good player back then, and this is really his first couple of seasons in. So he was another young rising star, just like Dan Hanbury at the time. He was coming into a team of really quite established players. We can look at Andre Everett, who came from the Dogs as well. He was a very much sort of bit player. He came in as a role player, did his job, tried to do it as best as possible. But yeah, look, the rest of the players, they almost picked themselves. I mean, it was pretty hard to pick a best from that team.
Yep.
I'm just looking at the team list now. It is amazing. No Mike Pike and no Rhys Shaw.
I think the best playing list I've ever seen Sydney had was probably... No. I reckon the list we had in 2013 was a bit better, but that was the year we got... It was either 13 or 15, whichever year we went to... with Dean Towers almost single-handedly won us a final against the Dockers.
The Freo match, 2013 Freo match.
Just on paper, I think that's the best list we've ever had. Just we got absolutely smashed by India.
Yeah, we did. And we got annihilated by both West Coast and Hawthorn in the middle of the season. I think rounds 15 and 16.
Yep.
But, well, Josh, it's time to wrap it up. Thank you very much for joining us for the first episode of the 2012 Sydney are Premiers podcast. We're going to come back in a week's time. We're going to do the second episode. We're doing 1 episode per round, so the second episode will be the round 2 review. I can't wait until you're back until then, Josh. So thank you so much.
No worries. And next episode, we won't have to dig into the back of the 2011 season as well, so it's going to be a little bit shorter.
It'll be a little shorter, yes.
But I'm pretty freaking excited by this actually, and it's just a shame we couldn't get the matches from 2005. But maybe we might make the 2005 final series a bit of a side project later on.
Yeah. So the next round is the round 2 home match against Fremantle. It was a little bit one-sided, but Fremantle did come back in the second half, so they did make it a bit more exciting. So stay tuned on Facebook. So you can get in touch with us on Facebook with at the Swans Blog and also at Swanscast Podcast. So we are going to do our live streamed matches on the Swans Blog page, and we are going to post these podcasts on the Swanscast Podcast page. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.